Hi everyone, so I have a cup of tea and today we're going to talk about perfectionism and environmentalism. This is a video that I wanted to make for quite a while. I think I actually mentioned wanting to make this video months ago. I think it's a really important topic because I think sometimes with environmental movements comes this idea that you have to be perfect and you have to do something 100% or you're not doing enough or you're not good enough. And I think that attitude can actually be really damaging to the cause. There is no way to be 100% sustainable. We breathe out carbon dioxide every breath we take, and everything we do has positive and negative impacts. And even if you think that something is totally fine, it might have negative impacts that you didn't know about. And maybe you think that that is disheartening or depressing to hear, but I think that that is actually freeing because if we are not trying to be perfect, you can focus on the areas where you can have the most positive impacts and what kinds of things you can incorporate into your lifestyle instead of trying to meet a specific set of rules or criteria. A lot of environmental movements I don't think are a one-size-fits-all solution, and I think it's more important to learn from them and grow and support each other instead of criticizing other people or being really aggressive and negative because somebody else isn't doing something the exact same way you're doing it. Movements that have a benchmark of perfection tend to also come with shame and guilt and negativity, and I'm gonna single out veganism because there is a lot of toxicity and negativity around veganism, which I think is so unfortunate because it is such an amazing, sustainable, and ethical movement and has so much to offer people and offer the world. But because of the toxicity and negativity, it can be really damaging, I think, to the cause. And I know that a lot of the negativity is probably coming from a good place. I know some people just do it to feel better about themselves, but some people are doing it because they are so passionate, and that comes out as aggressive sometimes. Understanding and recognizing effective communication methods is so important because there is a lot of very ineffective communication. If somebody feels attacked, they want to protect themselves and they become defensive. And so instead of listening to the other person, you are just trying so hard to protect yourself because your brain doesn't want to be attacked. It's a human thing. And what can actually happen is it strengthens your opinion because if you have had to protect yourself and defend yourself from something, it makes you more sure that what you're doing is right and correct. And that just becomes an extremely unproductive conversation. So, for example, if somebody comes up to someone else and says, basically you're a terrible person, you're wearing clothes from a sweatshop, that person is immediately going to defend themselves and try to justify their actions. It's unfortunate because I think that the people that are very aggressive and negative and hurtful are the loudest, and they're the ones that people see and hear the most, and it really, I think, sets a bad tone. And also it makes it very unwelcoming because anybody that's new and maybe curious and interested and sees those kinds of comments and responses and people attacking each other, and that doesn't make you want to take part and join and learn more. I think that's really important with any kind of environmental movement is being open to people that might not know what the issues are and might not know what they're doing is maybe wrong or bad, but they're there and they want to learn and they want to get better. And instead of attacking them for what they're not doing right, trying to help them to learn and improve. And I also want to talk about guilt and shame because it comes from two different places. It can come externally from other people, but it can also come internally from feeling really bad that you screwed up on whatever thing that you were trying to do. And I think it's important to remember that everybody screws up sometimes. Nobody is perfect. It's a dogmatic mentality to think that if we do X, Y, Z, it's going to save the world. We're all just trying our best, and hopefully we're all trying to learn and grow and improve. If you constantly feel bad about yourself and what you're doing and screwing up, then that doesn't encourage you to keep going and to keep trying. That kind of encourages people to give up. And I think a lot of that comes from this idea of what you should be doing in order to be sustainable, in order to be ethical. Everybody's situation is different in terms of your economic situation and where you live and what you have access to and what your lifestyle is like. So there's so many things that come into play. I do want to say though that I think some guilt is good. I think it can be a way to spur change. If you, for example, watch a documentary like The True Cost and you feel really guilty about supporting these brands that do such terrible things, that can help you think more about what you're doing and change your habits. But I don't think we should be feeling guilty all the time, and I don't think that that is helpful for long-term change. And I also want to talk a bit about the zero waste movement, because there definitely isn't the same kind of toxicity that there can be around veganism, but I've been seeing it creeping up a bit more and really judgmental comments. And I hope that that doesn't increase and that doesn't become a part of the movement. But zero waste inherently is a movement that has a mark of perfection. It has the word zero in it. I know that zero waste obviously is way more marketable and appealing and interesting than just low waste. But having that zero sets this expectation that you should produce zero garbage, where that's really not the case for a lot of people. And most people produce some garbage. I think actually everybody that's zero waste still produces some garbage, but it still sets that idea of where you should be. And it's obviously good to have goals, but I think sometimes that can encourage also the guilt. And I actually had an interesting experience which led me to think more about the guilt and shame that can come with environmental movements. And I did Plastic Free July last year, which is basically a zero waste challenge. And it was a really great experience. I'm so glad that I did it and I learned a lot. But I also felt so bad if I ordered a drink and I forgot to ask for no straw, or I picked up something at the grocery store and then realized that there was some plastic on it that I didn't realize. The city that I was living in at that time didn't have any place that you could buy bulk food, so I was really limited in what kinds of foods I could buy and the foods that I would normally eat. Now we actually do have a place you can buy bulk food, which is awesome. And maybe it's just me and how I responded to it, but I found that I started doing things because I didn't want to feel the guilt, instead of doing things because I thought that they were really helping. That just is such a different dynamic to me. And I've actually talked about this before in a different video when it comes to ethical fashion, about how you should be focusing on the good you can do instead of trying to not do any harm, because there's always going to be negative aspects. And instead of focusing on those and trying to not do bad things, I think it's better to try and focus on all the good things that you can do. And it also made certain decisions really heavy. For example, when we have barbecues with friends, I like to bring different kinds of veggie meats and some really good veggie meats, because I think it's a great way to introduce people that are not super used to vegan and vegetarian food, to show them that it's pretty much exactly like, the things they're used to eating, and they can still have their burgers and hot dogs and all that kind of stuff, and that they taste really good, because usually people that were around want to try it because they're interested, and people usually end up really liking it and being surprised by it. And that to me is such a great way to introduce people to a lifestyle change, instead of coming to an event like that and having just a bunch of vegetables and kind of giving the impression that all I eat is vegetables. But then comes the problem of those foods generally being packaged in plastic. And if I was really striving to be zero waste, I wouldn't buy them because of the plastic packaging. And to me, that then goes against this other thing I want to do, which is to show people that it's really easy and not difficult to eat plant-based. And so I think for me, not trying to be zero waste allows me to explore other avenues and still try to reduce my waste, but not in a way that makes me feel so bad if I decide to, buy some soy sausages for a barbecue. I think ultimately though, it's really about trying to learn as much as you can and finding what areas that you can have positive impacts on, and not really beating yourself up if you're not doing something the same way someone else is, and also not judging other people for how they're doing something. Having a benchmark of perfection also makes it really easy for people to just ignore the whole idea, because if people feel like they can't do something 100%, then they might not even try in the first place. So I think sometimes people look at movements like zero waste or veganism and think, I can't completely commit to that, so it's not for me. And they kind of remove themselves from something that they could maybe really incorporate into their life, but because they don't feel like they can do it fully, then they feel like they're gonna fail at it, and that it's just not something that's right for them. And I know people might say that these movements aren't actually like that, and no one expects someone to produce zero garbage, but from an outsider's perspective, that can be really intimidating. I've seen comments along the lines of, I'm trying to produce less garbage, but I could never be zero waste, or I could never be a minimalist, because they think that there is this very strict criteria that you have to meet in order to be that. And I mean, it's great that people are incorporating those things, but to feel like, you're always outside of this thing, I don't think is encouraging for people to stick with it and to keep going if they feel like, they're never going to be at that point. They could never do that. As humans, we want a network of support, and we want to be part of these tribes, and that's part of the reason why these labels are so important to people, and having, a way to define yourself. And I was listening to a really interesting revisionist history podcast where he talks about this idea of, I guess, like a social threshold where people aren't very likely to do something that completely deviates from the normal behavior if they're the only one or there's only a few people doing it. But the more people that they see, the more likely people are to do that as well. And I think that having these groups and communities is so important. And personally, I have gotten so much out of having you guys and out of having this community of people who are like-minded and on similar paths. While it is important to have these kind of tribes and groups and communities, it's also really important for them to be open and welcoming to people, especially if they're the only one in maybe their friends group or family or their immediate community that are doing this thing. It's really difficult to do that and to make changes in your lifestyle. And if you have a group of people online that are doing similar things and are supportive, encouraging, it makes it so much easier to do that. And yeah, I think that I will leave it there because I have rambled a lot on this topic, but I wanted to start a discussion. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments on perfectionism and also on the negativity and judgment that can sometimes come along with it, or the guilt and shame that can sometimes come along with it, and how we can be open and informative and supportive, because we all know that with any kind of environmental or ethical movement, the more people that are aware of it and doing something, the better things will get. So how can we bring in more people in a way that, is inclusive? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Thank you for watching, and thank you so much to those of you supporting me on Patreon, and I will see you in the next one.